My sexist coworker stole my presentation to get a promotion, so I let him present it to the CEO, along with my hidden trap. I work as a senior marketing strategist for a major tech company. For 3 months, I practically lived at the office developing a massive rebranding campaign for our highest-paying client. It was the kind of project that guaranteed a promotion. My manager, Kyle, is a notorious credit stealer. He has a habit of taking the work of female employees, tweaking a few words, and presenting it to upper management as his own vision. The day before the big presentation to our CEO and the client's executive team, Kyle casually asked me to email him the master file of the slide deck so he could run a final review on the formatting. I knew exactly what he was doing. He had pulled a similar stunt on a colleague last year, so I complied. I sent him the file. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find out Kyle had rescheduled the boardroom meeting an hour early and conveniently forgot to send me the calendar invite. He wanted to present my 3 months of labor completely by himself. I didn't panic. I just made myself a cup of coffee and walked into the glass-walled boardroom right in the middle of his presentation. Kyle shot me a dirty look, but couldn't say anything in front of the CEO and the clients. I sat down quietly in the back and watched him confidently click through my slides. He had replaced my name with his on the title card, and he was smoothly claiming all my market research as his own personal genius. Then he reached the climax of the pitch, the multi-million-dollar ad mock-ups. He gave a smug smile and clicked to the next slide. Instead of the mock-ups, the screen went completely black. A giant red padlock icon appeared on the projector, along with a bright white text box that read, "Security encryption? Please enter the creator's secure employee ID to unlock proprietary assets." Kyle froze. He awkwardly chuckled, muttered something about technical difficulties, and quickly typed in his employee ID. A loud buzz echoed through the room, and the screen flashed. "Access denied. User is not the author of this document." The room went dead silent. The CEO crossed his arms and asked Kyle what was going on. Kyle started visibly sweating, stammering about a glitch in the software. That's when I stood up. I walked to the front of the room, gently moved a panicking Kyle out of the way, and typed in my personal employee ID. The screen immediately unlocked, displaying the gorgeous ad mock-ups I had spent weeks designing. I turned to the CEO and the clients with a polite smile and said, "Apologies for the delay. I always embed security locks on my final drafts to prevent corporate espionage and ensure data integrity. I'll be taking over the rest of my presentation from here." The clients were incredibly impressed by the security protocol and absolutely loved the campaign. Kyle had to sit in the corner of the room in pure humiliation for the next 40 minutes while I successfully pitched the project. The aftermath was glorious. The CEO called me into his office later that afternoon. Kyle was suspended the next day for gross misconduct and academic-level plagiarism, and he was quietly let go by the end of the week. I was immediately given full credit for the campaign, a massive bonus, and I ended up taking Kyle's empty corner office.
My toxic parents forged my signature to break my lease and give my home to my pregnant sister. They didn't realize I actually own the house. I have always been the scapegoat of my family, while my younger sister, Chloe, is the undeniable golden child. I work in finance, keep to myself, and 3 years ago, I finally bought my dream home, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a highly desirable neighborhood. However, I told my family I was just renting. I did this because my parents are notoriously financially abusive and feel entitled to everything I earn. To protect my privacy, I bought the house through an LLC that I am the sole owner of. 6 months ago, Chloe got pregnant with her unemployed boyfriend. They live in a cramped, moldy studio apartment. At a family dinner, my mom dropped a bomb. She demanded that I give up my rental to Chloe. She argued that I am single and don't need 4 bedrooms, while Chloe needs a safe space for the baby. I laughed and told them absolutely not. They called me a selfish monster, and I left the dinner early. I thought that was the end of it. I was so wrong. 2 weeks later, I logged into my LLC's property management email portal and found a very strange message. It was an email from my father. Attached was a formal lease break and tenant transfer request. My parents had somehow found out the name of my LLC from public property records and assumed it was a corporate landlord. The attachment was wild. It contained a forged signature of my name, officially surrendering the property. It also included an application for Chloe and her boyfriend to take over the lease, along with a sob story about how I was unexpectedly moving out of state. But here's the craziest part. To sweeten the deal for the landlord, my parents wired a $5,000 non-refundable security deposit directly to my LLC's bank account to immediately lock down the house for Chloe. I was furious, but my lawyer advised me not to intervene just yet. He told me to let them dig their own grave. So, operating as the anonymous LLC, I officially approved Chloe's application. I sent back a digitally signed confirmation that the lease transfer was accepted and the $5,000 deposit was processed. For the next month, my parents and sister were incredibly smug. Chloe kept texting me things like, "Hope you're packing," and the landlord said we can move in on the 1st, so you better be out by Friday. I just replied with thumbs up emojis. I didn't pack a single box. Moving day arrived. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat on my front porch. At exactly 9 a.m., my parents and Chloe pulled into my driveway in a massive rented U-Haul truck. My mom jumped out, marching up my driveway with a smug grin, holding the printed lease agreement from the LLC. "I told you to be out," she yelled. "We illegally took over your lease. Hand over the keys or we are calling the police to evict you." I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and handed her a thick manila envelope. "You don't need to call the police," I said. I already did. My mom opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of the LLC incorporation documents, proving I am the sole owner of the property, and the landlord they had been emailing. Behind that was a copy of the forged lease break document with my fake signature, highlighted in bright yellow. And finally, a drafted police report for felony identity theft and wire fraud. The color completely drained from my parents' faces. Chloe started sobbing hysterically in the driveway when she realized she wasn't getting the house. My dad started screaming that they wanted their $5,000 deposit back. I calmly informed them that per the contract they signed with my LLC, the deposit was non-refundable, and I would be keeping it as compensation for their fraudulent attempt to break a legal contract. I gave them exactly 60 seconds to get off my property before the police arrived to arrest them for forgery. They scrambled back into the U-Haul and sped off. I used their $5,000 to upgrade my home security system and put up a new fence. I haven't spoken to them since, but through the grapevine, I heard Chloe's boyfriend left her, and my parents are still desperately trying to pay off the massive loan they took out for the deposit they gave me.
My mother-in-law collected $3,000 from our relatives for a family reunion I was hosting, kept the money for herself, and called me greedy. So I changed the venue. I own a house with a huge backyard. So my mother-in-law, Susan, volunteered me to host the annual family reunion for 50 people. I agreed, strictly on the condition that the cost would be split. Susan eagerly offered to collect the money from all the relatives to cover the catering, tent rentals, and drinks. Fast forward to 2 weeks before the event. I asked Susan for the funds so I could finalize the caterer. Susan scoffed, crossed her arms, and said, "Family doesn't charge family. You and my son make enough money. You should pay for it as a gift." I told everyone, "You are being greedy," but I handled it. I felt my stomach drop. I asked her what she meant by handled it. Turns out Susan had collected $60 ahead from 50 relatives, totaling $3,000. Instead of giving it to me for the event, she used it to book herself a luxury 10-day cruise to the Bahamas for the following month. She told the rest of the family that I had graciously decided to cover the entire reunion out of my own pocket. I was absolutely fuming, but I didn't yell. I just smiled, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "You know what, Susan? You're right. I'll handle everything." The next day, I didn't book a caterer. I didn't rent a single tent or chair. Instead, I drafted a mass email to every single family member on the invite list, including her husband and all of her siblings. I wrote, "Hi everyone, I'm so excited to see you all next Saturday." Unfortunately, there has been a slight change of venue because Susan generously offered to collect the $3,000 catering budget and decided to use it to book herself a Bahamas cruise. I can no longer afford to host 50 people. The reunion will now be held at Susan's house. Please bring your own chairs and be sure to ask her about her upcoming tropical vacation. See you there. I hit send, locked my doors, and turned my phone on Do Not Disturb. When I finally checked my phone hours later, my screen was lit up with dozens of missed calls and explosive text messages. Susan's husband, my father-in-law, had completely lost his mind when he found out she stole from his own siblings. The extended family bombarded her with furious demands for immediate refunds. The reunion did end up happening at Susan's house. She had to max out her personal credit card at the last minute to buy cheap grocery store hot dogs and folding chairs for 50 furious relatives who spent the entire afternoon interrogating her about the stolen money. As for me, my husband and I stayed home, ordered a giant pizza, and enjoyed a quiet, drama-free weekend in our huge, empty backyard. Susan was forced to cancel her non-refundable cruise to pay everyone back, and she hasn't dared to ask me to host a single thing since.
I worked 2 jobs to support my husband's dream business. When I collapsed from exhaustion, he complained that his dinner was late. I have been married to Mark for 4 years. When we got married, Mark begged me to let him quit his corporate job to start a boutique fitness coaching business. He promised it would only take 6 months to get off the ground. I agreed, took on a second remote job to cover our mortgage, and handled 100% of the cooking, cleaning, and mental load so he could focus on his grind. 3 years passed. His business never made a profit. He spent his days at the gym, hanging out with clients, and coming home supposedly exhausted while I worked 60 hours a week and then cooked his specific macro-friendly meals. Whenever I brought up my severe burnout, he would guilt trip me, saying I didn't believe in his dreams and that a supportive wife wouldn't complain about building a future together. Last Tuesday, the exhaustion finally caught up with me. I caught a severe flu and collapsed in the kitchen while packing his lunch. I was burning up with a fever of 103 and could barely stand. I managed to crawl into bed and texted Mark, who was in the living room playing video games, begging him to get me some medicine and a glass of water. He read the text, sighed loudly, and shouted from the other room, "Can you just order it on DoorDash? I'm in the middle of a ranked match." I fell in and out of consciousness all day. I didn't eat or drink anything. At 7 p.m., my bedroom door finally opened. Mark walked in, looked at me shivering under the blankets, and said, "Hey, I know you're not feeling well, but are you going to make dinner soon? I need to hit my protein goals, and we're out of clean Tupperware." He didn't ask how I was. He didn't bring me water. He didn't touch my forehead. He just looked at me like a broken household appliance that was inconveniencing his evening routine. I didn't yell, and I didn't cry. I just stared at him, realizing with absolute clarity that I wasn't his partner. I was his maid, his ATM, and his substitute mother. I waited for him to leave for the gym the next morning. Then, I called my sister to help me pack. I transferred my money out of our joint accounts, broke the lease on the apartment that only I was paying for, and left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter next to a pile of dirty Tupperware. He texted me 40 times that night, not to ask if I was safe, but to ask how to turn on the dishwasher. I blocked his number.